All right. Thank you everyone for sparing the time to come today, and we'll just I'll show you our latest paper, and this is part of the first published step of an ongoing research that we're working on with Marietta Mann and Professor Shan and Professor Dolphus. It entails using a process-based vegetation model, which is a dynamic vegetation model, and I'll tell you about that in a second. And we are trying to see the potential forest ranges for Turkey as a whole and its immediate neighborhoods. Our first paper was, this is basically a baseline paper, in which we determined the bioclimatic tolerance limits for 3 additional taxa to what is already in the model that we're using. And we are using climatic input, and we are running our model, and we're looking at the output to see for the historical period if it matches what we see on the ground. Turkey, as you know, especially the Anatolian Peninsula, is highly fragmented in terms of its terrestrial ecosystem. So it's actually a challenge because we're running the model with as if there is no human presence on the peninsula. This is, like I said, this is our first official results. We have actually presented and shown our preliminary results before at platforms such as here and EGU and other places. But officially, our baseline paper is finally out, and we are going to continue our research with the parameters that we publish in here. Let's see. Okay. As you all know, I mean, we are in Eurasian Institute of Earth Sciences. As you all know, Turkey is, I don't need to explain it to you, the heterogeneous topography, it's several meso and microclimates, it's biodiversity, especially in terms of terrestrial ecosystems. We are part of the, a large part of the peninsula is part of the Mediterranean type ecosystem, so which are typical for their inherent biodiversity. And Anatolia, being a peninsula, is also home to several endemic species. Endemism is actually high in here. We had to, because this is our first paper, in case you had a chance to read it, and it's open access, by the way, until 9th of December. So if you hadn't had a chance to read it, you can easily access it I can provide you the link at the end, or you can just search for it on the internet, and you can read the detailed introduction there. But basically, because this is a baseline paper, we just started off as describing our city area in great detail. We have, other than the Mediterranean type ecosystems, we also have on the northeastern, the Black Sea coast of the country, we have a temperate rainforest. You know, like we wouldn't expect. And we have several other small enclaves of different type ecosystems. Why this is important? Because prior to our study, a high resolution resolving of this of the terrestrial ecosystems of Turkey had not been done for the region as a whole. It had been done in small segments, for example, small areas where smaller areas of a river basin or a plateau, but it hasn't been done for the entire country. Lower resolution resolvement of the terrestrial ecosystems had been done in international studies using really coarse climate inputs, but here we aim to use higher resolution climate data, and for that we use Air5 land, which is 9 kilometers horizontal resolution, which was sufficient for a regional study such as this. But as I'll tell you later, higher resolution, high quality climate data, we are in the market for. Basically, we are searching for it, and if we can find it, we'd be happy to revise our ongoing runs with that new data. But so far, we are using Air5 land for the historic. And just to give you a hint of what we're doing right now, we are also looking until the end of the century, and we are sticking to 10 kilometer horizontal resolution, 9 to 10 kilometer horizontal resolution for now. But like I said, we did undertake for the historical period higher resolution runs, and the results are fantastic because it gives us Turkey is a high country, and the different vegetation belts and different elevations, you can resolve them with higher resolution climate data. So that's why higher resolution climate data is important for regional cities such as this one. But so far, Area 5 land has just worked out fine. The model itself, you may remember, those of you that have attended a previous presentation that I gave here, it's a process-based model. Basically, it's a complex dynamic model, which has several equations that are tied into each other, the output by means of outputs and inputs. But basically, it's a machine, and we feed into the machine high quality temperature, precipitation, radiation, solar radiation, daily data, and we feed into it annual atmospheric concentrations of carbon dioxide. And we also define segments of soil data for the study region as the model wants it. And it basically, the soil component, it's basically interested in percolation. So when it rains, how much of it is going to infiltrate into what levels of the soil horizon. We originally ran the model with the predefined taxa just to see if the outcome was logical, somewhat logical. The predefined taxa, by predefined taxa, I mean 21 plant species that are defined as plant functional types, which I will get into it in a little while, that are defined into the model by means of their bioclimatic thresholds as well as their plant traits. Because it's the historical run, we ran it for 38 years. The model requires a minimum of 30 years so that it can set up its spin-up period and can give us some initial conditions from which it will build up the ecosystems. We didn't have to deal with major disturbances such as earthquakes, or for regions that are affected, volcano destructions, or major flooding events, or etc. So the only disturbance that we had to deal with for the 38-year period was wildfires, which is for the Mediterranean type ecosystems an important and integral disturbance type. So we also work with that, and we also have some results which we showed in different platforms, and we are also sort of channeling our ongoing research towards the change in frequency of these disturbances with changes in climate. So our inputs are, as I said, climatic drivers from Area 5 land, which we collated. At the time we started this research, Area 5 land was only available for the period of 1982 to 2021. So we started for this baseline paper for that period. But right now we have, with Area 5 land becoming available from 1951 on, we expanded our sort of temporal resolution. Our temporal resolution is daily, and our spatial resolution is the spatial resolution of Area 5 land, which is 9 kilometers. As you know, our atmospheric CO2 is, there are annual values, and our soil was, for this paper, a 0.5 times 0.5 horizontal resolution, but now we have a finer resolution and more complex soil data set, which we're working with, which I recently finished, and that will hopefully be integrated into our next paper. But we did some runs just to check how the results would be affected, and soil doesn't have a major effect for this region, but of course the results are improved. And as the inputs, the most important were the individual plant traits and bioclimatic limits that we introduced into the research, and to make a reasonable and logical sort of simulation we introduced 3 new taxa to the already existing taxa, increasing the number of taxa that the model was running for, which does affect competition between species, which I will also get into it in a little bit. The model is process-based, and it runs on a stand, which is in this case a 9 km by 9 km grid that Area 5 land assigns climatic input for. Within this grid, there are 100 patches, and you can increase the number of patches if you wish for, higher resolution studies. This could be an, important addition, but for us, the default was sufficient. The 81 km square grid is divided into tiny segments of 100 patches, and within each patch there is an assigned stochasticity. But of course, over the course of the run, this averages, and in the end, we get a stand output for that grid. And then the grids themselves are not connected, but the patches within the grid themselves are connected through water runoffs and net primary production share. So there is some land atmosphere interaction on a patch scale, but not on a stand scale. Like I said, we use a minimum, the model requires a minimum of 30-year climate data for its spin-up. And the taxa, which we introduced, were 3 additional conifer types, which was Pinus berisha, important tree species for the Mediterranean type ecosystems, Pinus nigra, which is integral for Turkey, and Cedrus lubini, which gave us a really hard time to define its climatic limits for reasons soon to be disclosed. We also had 13 broadleaf taxa, which are, Quercus types, and we had Betula types, and we had Tilia and Ulmus and all those. And the shrubs were assigned into 2 groups: is Mediterranean rain green shrubs and boreal shrubs, which are more tolerant of colder temperatures. Those are sort of, we accepted them as the pseudomachis that are found in the Black Sea region. But for Turkey, we decided that the shrub types, as these 2 groups that are taking into machis for the Mediterranean, pseudomachis for the Black Sea region, were not sufficient. So we opted to use Juniperus oxycedrus, which is found as a small tree in the Mediterranean type ecosystems, especially here in Turkey, and Quercus coxifera, which is commonly found as an understory. We introduced them as shrubs into the model as well. This is the, for those of you who are interested in biogeography and plant traits, this is basically, it's also published with the paper. These are the bioclimatic limits that we used for individual taxa. But here, it's important to read them as not specific bioclimatic limits for each taxa, because there is an inherent adaptation that regional adaptation, I should say. So fine tuning is necessary. For example, a temperature range that's given for Pinus sylvestris for Turkey, for the Anatolian Peninsula, might be adequate for Pinus sylvestris globally. But for example, its drought resilience might be, we know that the Pinus sylvestris here in the Anatolian Peninsula are more drought resilient, just like in the Iberian Peninsula, than those that are up north. So we had to also fine tune drought sensitivity. We also had to fine tune a little bit. We didn't have to deal too much with, I'm talking about the existing taxa that was already predefined into the model. We didn't touch their temperature sensitivities, but we had to deal with their drought limitation, and that also shows the major limitation for terrestrial ecosystems for this region. As for our outputs, there are several outputs that come out of the model. If you're looking into runoff, you can just see that. If you're looking into net primary production, it's there. If you're trying to calculate area burnt, you can do that. What I missed to tell you is that this paper came out on the previous version of the model. The model is right now updated, this dynamic vegetation model that we're working with, LPJGES. And we are now using the updated version, which does require a higher number of climatic input, which is also a major, we find that it's a major improvement for both the distribution and the dynamics on a stand scale. But for this version, the outputs are the same in both versions. The new version is also improved in terms of trying to forecast or estimate the potential frequency of wildfires. So this older version was a perfect fit, and we were called to continue using this by experts who had used this model. That this would be a good idea for us to determine the bioclimatic limits as opposed to the new version. So we kept with it and we published our paper with this. What you're looking at here is the three species, the three taxa that we introduced into the model anew. We introduced them from scratch. Pinus nigra, as you heard Evrim's talk last time, is widely studied for Turkey and its distribution is well known. So it's the least problematic of the three species that we introduced into the model. For this, when I say introduction, there's basically an instruction file that comes, that is introduced to the model. So the model takes the bioclimatic limits from this instruction file, looks up the climatic input, and then runs its calculations. And in the end, it says, well, these species are suitable to grow in these regions. Or these plant functional types, I should say, not species, these plant functional types that are assigned as species to the model are suitable to grow in these areas. But of course, you are limited because we are making our runs with only a set of 24 species or a set of 24 plant functional types. However, when you're using keystone species, such as the one that we're using from a climatic perspective, then you're still on safe ground. So in the end, like I said, there are several outputs, and one of these outputs is the leaf area index. The leaf area index that we are showing here are basically Cedrus silvani. The orange polygons that you're looking at is from the Directorate General of Forestry for Turkey. We had a data set which had been collated over a decade, starting from 2007 to 2017. And this was our primary verification method. So the orange polygons are the places where you can find Cedrus silvani or Pinus brucia or Pinus nigra now. And the green grids that you're looking at are the leaf area index that the model produce, and these are, we're looking into where they match and where they are amiss. And then we're looking into researching reasons why they are showing in places where they haven't been recorded, or where they are not showing where they have been recorded. Which is a lesser number of cases. Mostly, we had a pretty good coverage of the taxa, so we could see the potential for forest ranges for this peninsula. But in terms of why they are not there today, we also had a pretty good number of explanations, starting from anthropogenic interference, ecosystem fragmentation, and whatnot. So basically, this was one of our verification methods, which was qualitative. And we were searching also for a quantitative method where we could verify our outputs. Like I said, in the qualitative method, this is our 4-plot chart. So here, I will try to explain to you in more detail. Here, this is the Director Generate's data set in vector form. And when we blow it up and we extrapolate it to 9-kilometer resolution to match Area 5 land output, then this is what we end up with. And the ranges that we have for our outputs, and this is a density dominance output. Basically, the density per each grid of individual taxa that has been assigned to it by the model, we take the mode of it. So for example, the most commonly found taxa per grid gets colored into this map. So this is the dominant species per grid. You can accept it as that. And this is the dominant species per grid from their actual presence on the ground. And this is simulation. One of the things that was confusing was the Pinus sylvestris, the purple color here, but it makes sense when we look at the fourth map, which is a biome version of our output, of our simulation output. And here you're in fact looking into a very sparse landscape. Majority of it is covered by grasslands with individual trees here and there. So here you're not in fact looking into a dense forest. So we accepted it as a place which was suitable for Pinus sylvestris to grow and to exist, but not to form lush forests, so to speak. So basically, we were continuously, when we were evaluating, even qualitatively evaluating our output, we were continuously looking into several different outputs and considering them all together. We're looking into the biome version, we were looking into the leaf area indices, and we were also looking into density dominance to see if they would fit this really ecologically important data set that we had from the General Directorate of Forestry, which was our primary observation data that we were sort of, comparing our outputs with. And our second, because we were also searching for a quantitative method to compare our outputs to, we chose remote sensing. And with that, we use a modest data set, which had its integral problems, but this was the best thing that we had available. And we looked at net primary production. Basically, prior to looking at net primary production, we selected certain regions where we would look into net primary production for the reason that the data set uses a different land classification method than the one that we were sort of considering our outputs with. And it's a University of Maryland land classification system, which MODIS works with. It works underneath this data set, along with its own climate reanalysis data, from which it's basically estimating photosynthetically, fractional photosynthetically available radiation. And from these MPP calculations, we basically came up to this. And here are polygons. For example, here on the Aegean side, this tiny little polygon, it actually crosses into a woody savanna, but it's homogeneous. And for the University of Maryland land cover classification, which MODIS dataset natively uses, this is a good thing because here we can sort of compare the with minimal, mistakes, we can compare the net primary production for the estimation and of the simulation. So these are our outputs, and out of the 8 polygons, other than 3 of them, we had a pretty good match. In these 3 polygons, our conclusion was the climate data set, the coarse climate data set that the MODIS data set was using. Cloudiness as a factor, we had to eradicate the MODIS data set sort of data by its inherent quality control with using a 50% threshold. So that sort of left us with fewer data, which we were comparing our simulation outputs. So this was also a factor. Land class classification was a factor, and so in all these 3 areas, we figured out that perhaps what MODIS was seeing on the ground was not homogeneous enough than what LPG gas was producing. Also, literature told us that Modis has a tendency to overestimate the net primary production for several regions. Now, as a conclusion, as I run out of time, as a conclusion, we actually ended up with three important results. One of them is this was the first application of high resolution climate data. It could be higher, like I said, but this was what we had in hand that was consistent. High resolution climate data to a dynamic vegetation model. In a process-based setting, basically. With this, we actually saw the potential for a peninsula that has been inhabited throughout the Holocene, and that still has anthropogenic interference in terms of ecosystem fragmentation and mainly ecosystem fragmentation. So now we could see the forest potential for this area. We also saw how competition and limitation of resources does interplay into the composition of forests in Turkey. And also we also were able to attain the stressors and limitations within the peninsula. But this is not the end. This is, like I said, this was only a baseline paper. And our current research is at least threefold until the end of my PhD, but I'm hoping to further continue with it. But so far, what we are planning on looking at into the entire 21st century to see how the forest ecosystems for this peninsula and its surrounding regions are going to be affected. And we're looking into primarily migration of taxa and how temperate and boreal species are going to be affected by changes in climate. And we are also interested in how the frequency of disturbances will be affected, but mainly one of the more curious questions we're looking into is how transition zones are going to be affected in the terrestrial ecosystems for this area. So we will continue to identify bioclimatic thresholds for key tree taxa. A few more we decided are still needed after we talked with some botanical experts. We may not necessarily need them for the GCM runs that we are already undertaking right now, but it would be good to have bioclimatic identification of taxa as plant functional types that we can introduce into the model for small scale and using higher resolution climate input for small scale studies. We saw this recently in a field trip that we did to the eastern, northeastern part of the country along the Black Sea coast, and not for the country as a whole, but for that region, introduction of a new taxon for the simulation rounds in that region improved the outputs majorly because of competition for resources, etc. Of course, we will continue to conduct field trips to disturbance sites so we can look at how succession is affected, what it is affected by. Is it anthropogenic? Is it climate? And finally, we are in the market for high quality and regional, hopefully, climate input so that we can continue to run our simulations. So with that, I end my presentation, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them. This is a quote that we shared. Our paper came, well, when we submitted it, we lost Edward Wilson, and we wanted to pay some tribute to him. So this is one of my favorite quotes by him. And with that, I leave you. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.